Thank you very much again, and thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to present the Antarctic Circumnavigation Expedition as an example of international collaboration in Antarctica. I will present these lessons learned from 2016 and 17, but also taking them to the present time and looking at what we are actually still using and we think can be useful for others too. So what was ACE? ACE was a circumnavigation expedition around Antarctica that took place, started in Cape Town in December 2016 and came back to Cape Town after stops in Hobart and Punta Arenas in March 2017. It was based on the Russian Akademik Treshnikov and did this full circumnavigation that you can see on the track here in 3 legs. On board, what was special is that there were always in total 55 researchers per leg that were actually collaborating on 22 separate research projects. It was truly international with 18 nationalities and 11 languages spoken on board. And they were carrying out a wide range of disciplines. I'm sorry, I have to turn around. I'm too short-sighted to read on that very small screen. To carry out a holistic view of the Southern Ocean, looking at terrestrial and marine environments. So I will just play a very brief video and then go over the lessons learned. I hope it works. I need to press again. So that's leg 1 from Cape Town to Hobart.
This is a truly international cruise with 18 different countries taking part. That makes it unusual right from the start. This cruise is special because of the mix of people, because of the range of projects, and because we're trying to take a holistic view of the Southern Ocean. We're trying to do things which most cruises don't try to do. We're trying to do terrestrial work and marine work on the same cruise. We were extraordinarily lucky to see, because there are very few days in any year when it's like that, and we were there at just the right moment. So are we ambitious? Of course we are. We're ambitious even to see Heard Island without the cloud. This is a start, I hope, of what will become a where do they want Switzerland to be? How do they want Swiss scientists to be working? What sort of things can Switzerland contribute that makes it special?
Right, so what was special? A number of things were special about ACE, and probably the way it started was special. And it was not a long-term planned activity of a well-established institution. Actually, the institution didn't exist yet. The Swiss Polar Institute was created actually a few days after the idea of ACE was launched. And it came from an opportunity. And I think this is maybe also a lesson that things can be unconventional and still bring a lot of, yield a lot of science results, is that a leading science organization, which was not polar at all, the Polytechnical School of Lausanne, was approached by a philanthropist who had a vessel and who said, do you want to put science on my vessel? I'm going there anyway. Do you want to do something with it? And the president of EPFL at the time was someone for whom a missed opportunity was probably something close to being criminal, and therefore he accepted, which came with a sort of a lot of unknowns for the organization. So first the EPFL, the Polytechnic of Lausanne, and then what turned into the Swiss Polar Institute, set out to organize this international expedition, started by launching an international call for projects, which was possible because the funding was not national funding for this expedition. And it was a public-private partnership with a lot of philanthropic funding. Then after the grants had been selected, the projects had been selected, grants needed to be managed, PIs needed to be brought together, and the support of the science logistics, of course, had to be organized. In order to do so, the first thing that was done was to set up a technical committee with representatives of the major organizations that were actually sort of responsible for the regions that were going to be visited in the Southern Ocean. And you can see the organizations here. And they were really crucial because they accompanied the program from the very start, the inception of the call for projects, all the way to the logistics and permitting processes. And brought in, of course, their expertise and their teams as support and in order to have exchanges with the project team. The other thing was that when selecting the projects, an international and independent scientific panel, actually some of them are here in the room, met in Paris to select the projects. They were slightly over-ambitious, and that's one of the lessons learned afterwards. We had too many projects. Over 100 projects applied to be part of the expedition, and the panel did find it quite difficult to say no to some of them. And that proved problematic in the management of the expedition, but overall a lesson, of course. And we hired a chief scientist, David Walton, whom you just saw, as well as a data manager right away from the start. So we actually didn't really have much command over of much of the expedition, but these elements we wanted to have right away set, and that proved a really worthwhile investment. So lesson learned one was that combining too many multidisciplinary projects on board, especially a vessel, is, of course, highly difficult and causes many problems in terms of time constraints, in terms of space, in terms of conflicting priorities and expectations. That's very clear, and that was a lesson learned, I think, the hard way by teams and by the management. At the same time, it also provided, and we shouldn't forget that, amazing networking and training in a multi-disciplinary environment, especially for early careers, and very valuable multidisciplinary data sets. In terms of being a new institution working in Antarctic, this was clearly also a huge challenge. And nothing could have been done without the well-established institutions. That's for sure. The permits in the Southern Ocean were really quite complicated. That's an understatement. And very understandably so, new organizations supported by philanthropic funding were viewed with a certain level of suspicion, and that's totally understandable. Yet that type of approach also brought a number of and brought a flexibility and let's say positive elements of opportunism to the fore as well, which now that we are a slightly more established institution, I think we should not forget about and try to keep and not get too much into our own ways as well. We didn't have a national agenda, which gave a lot of freedom to bring in external people and to bring in the best. And I think this was definitely part of what David Walton was saying in What is Special, bringing people that maybe don't necessarily have the occasion to work together. The monthly meetings of the technical committee, as I mentioned, worked extremely well, was extremely important, as well as the international aspects of the panel. So, even if you're new, learn from the established and learn from the best, and try to keep what positive elements come from being a newcomer alive. The data management was something that we felt from the start we would need to do really well with such an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary cruise. We had a short lead time to the expedition, so some elements of what we would have liked to set up as systems on board were limited. Yet, having a dedicated data manager on board and also hiring her for 4 years after the time of the expedition provided for a really important and valuable, I think, asset for the scientists who had participated. This also led to joint applications for separate funding in Switzerland through data science centers, which helped bring together those data sets which actually made sense to bring together, namely here on air-sea interaction into a joint project managed by a data scientist in order to create more out of those separate data sets. And I think this was also a very interesting learning curve for the involved scientists to work together with a data scientist who brought a new view to their science and to their sometimes very thematic approaches. And having committed data manager also helped the whole element of collaborating with established networks and repositories, for sure. I think I would like to stress here probably our most valuable lesson, which was post-cruise support. I mean, in our case, the post-cruise support lasted twice the duration of the preparation lead time of the expedition. And I'm not saying that for those who have a much longer and totally required, of course, lead time, they should respect this 1 to 2. But I think this was extremely valuable. We also brought together the PIs physically together up to 3 years after the expedition. Then COVID hit and that physical element disappeared. We coordinated presentations early on, but also later. Currently, there are over 75 peer-reviewed publications that are all openly accessible from ACE, and over 108 data sets that can be found through international repositories. And this is probably where we think our investment has paid off the best, is that we insisted on an open access policy for most of the projects, for all the projects, and most of the projects really played the game, negotiating embargoes, of course, but in the end, releasing their data and their publications. And maybe last but not least, something that I would like to underline is that having worked with the community that was on board for 4 years after the expedition, also enabled to keep alive the early careers community that had built on board. Many of the early careers stayed longer than 1 leg, sometimes even the 3 legs, so spending 3 months together, and therefore also building extremely valuable networks across countries, which we help them foster. So this is it from me and about ACE, and I hope this sort of relates to some of your own conclusions about your own expeditions. We did bring them, our lessons learned, into other expeditions we have organized since in the Arctic. And what I would like to do here is also to thank my colleague Nina Schuback, who was on board for 3 months and prepared this PowerPoint, and I see she didn't put her name on, so thank you to her.